Hi everyone, I'm Rana from Formula UR, and today I'm going to talk about how Daniel Ricciardo has managed to turn around his season. After the Austrian Grand Prix, things were looking quite bleak for him. He was out in Q2 on the same track in consecutive weekends when Norris fought for pole. He was solid in the races, but again his teammate on the podium wasn't a good look for him. What preceded those weekends was slightly better, but was still far off the pace of his teammate most of the time, and his MCL35M as well wasn't being maximised to its potential. Fast forward right after the US GP at the end of October, those struggles appear to be a distant memory. So how did he do it? Before I go further, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. We aim to hit 500 subs by 2022, so if you could help us reach our goal, that will be awesome. Firstly, I have to say this is still not the Ricciardo of Renault and Red Bull. The fundamental traits of the Mclaren are just not made for what he likes, and there's only so much a driver of his style can do. However, I believe he's finally reached that point, or is very close to it. For the first part of the season, Ricciardo was struggling with the front limited nature of the McLaren car. It can be said that the natural balance of the car is the most extreme on the grid in terms of understeer, and so getting that car rotated as quickly as possible is the way to extract maximum lap time from it. Ricciardo's natural driving style, however, is not designed to manipulate a racing car in this manner. Whilst we're used to him making outrageous last of the late breaker moves in his Red Bulls or even Renaults, the way he drives an F1 car when pushing to its limit is in fact the complete opposite. He's a driver who can be called rear limited, in the sense that he's very good at driving around the limitations of a poor rear end. Max Verstappen, Kimi Räikkönen and Michael Schumacher historically have these similar traits. Ricciardo and Verstappen don't attack any part of the corner more than is necessary. They're earlier and lighter on the brakes and carry the brakes longer into the corner. They don't transfer as much weight to the front of the car when under maximum longitudinal load, or in other words, when the car is in a straight line when braking, which gives the car a stable platform mid-corner and on corner exit. This technique is perfect for keeping the rear in check and works really well on the Red Bull and the Renault, who naturally have rear limitations. When it comes to a more front limited car, aka understeery, like the McLaren, this year's reworked Ferrari, or the RP20 from last year, this technique of Ricciardo's, Verstappen's and Räikkönen's is not as effective. As I said earlier, to extract the lap time from a front limited car, it's required that the car is rotated as quickly as possible. This is done basically by stamping hard on the brakes and as late as can be, and having maximum weight shift from front to rear when coming off the brakes in the shortest amount of time. Like a spring or trampoline. The more you go down, the more you go up. It's the same with braking. The more weight shift you have from front to rear when coming off the brakes, the more the car will rotate. This style is what Norris has used throughout his racing career, not just in F1. He likes to brake very late and uses a lot of braking power whilst releasing the brake earlier as well. His compromise with this style is that he doesn't square off corners as much as Daniel or Max. By this I mean he turns in much earlier than a driver like Max or Daniel and elongates the corner's arc and travels a greater distance, which in turn puts greater load on the entire rear of the car. However, this isn't a problem in a front limited car or an understeery car like the McLaren, because it's designed to cope with excessive rear loads like this, and it's got a lot of rear grip anyway, which fundamentally helps the car in this situation. So the drawbacks of his style aren't as noticed. However, the drawbacks of the style can be seen in other circumstances. F2 2018 is a good example, where he was struggling for confidence at the rear of the car, whilst George Russell perfected the style required and romped away to the title in dominant fashion. Not talking about Lando for a second, but drivers who have a similar style to him include the likes of Sergio Perez, Carlos Sainz and Seb Vettel, for instance. When you don't give those drivers the rear of the car they like, they struggle. All of them elongate corners, and they need that confidence and that grip from the rear end to make it work due to the extra load they're putting through. However, as we saw with Sainz at Renault, Perez this year, Vettel in 2020 for instance, they all struggled without that rear confidence. So it's a trait of all these drivers with this style to have the same common problem. But at the same time, when you give them that rear end or that understeery balance, they tend to feel more comfortable than someone like Ricciardo or Raikkonen, as we saw at Ferrari alongside Vettel and Alonso, that Kimi couldn't drive the Ferrari, the understeery Ferraris like Seb could, and Daniel found himself in a similar situation at the beginning of the year. What about drivers like Alonso and Lewis then? Fernando and Lewis are very unique. They have slight differences to Lando Norris, Daniel Ricciardo's style, which makes them incredibly versatile. It's a topic for another video, but to sum it up, Lewis has a fundamentally similar braking technique to Norris. He's late and hard on the brakes, but he tends to square off corners much more and doesn't put the rear through as much a load. Therefore, his style's very versatile and works in understeery cars and oversteery cars. Alonso, on the other hand, again is a hard braker. He doesn't brake as late as a Lewis, etc., but what he does is create a false understeer on corner entry, which tricks the front of the car into rotating. And when he's in an oversteery car, this false understeer helps under-rotate the car for a little bit to keep the rear in check. So both drivers, Lewis and Fernando, have unique things about them which make them very, very versatile. Going back to Ricciardo, how did he get on top of the car? According to the team, he's been working in the sim all year, perfecting the technique to drive around the front limitations, as well as Mclaren incorporating some minor changes to help him have more confidence on corner entry. Of course, the restrictions on development this year have made it impossible to give Daniel a car he really likes and has confidence in. So the upgrades McLaren brought were very minor, and it's mostly down to Daniel's hard work. As a result, since Austria, he's outqualified, outraced and outscored Norris, both with and without wet sessions. What's more interesting is since the summer break, in particular, he's shown to be quick on a variety of different tracks. Zandvoort, Monza and Austin are three very different tracks and have very different characteristics, yet the Honey Badger was the faster McLaren driver in all three races. Why do I mention these three in particular? Well, since the summer, these three tracks have been the only fully dry weekends, and the Honey Badger had the upper hand. And how can I do a video like this without bringing up the success and the win in Monza? That weekend on the whole simply showed to everyone that he was not finished. 4 milliseconds off Norris on a track with many big braking zones. He then went on to have a super sprint race, a superb start in the Grand Prix, led the race all the way through and had everyone in check, setting the fastest lap on the last lap for good measure. In fact, his time at McLaren is only getting started. As he said, he never left, he just stepped aside for a while. I hope you enjoyed this video on Ricciardo. If you liked the video, smash the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more F1 content coming your way the end of 2021 and into 2022. Until then, peace.